Hi, Cathy. Malika Andrews, ESPN. I just wanted to get some clarity on some of the specifics that Napheesa Collier said about your conversation that you had that was previously private. Did you in fact say that, quote, players should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the rights deal that I got them?
There's a lot of...
Could the Indiana Fever, a team once hailed as the next great WNBA dynasty, be imploding from the inside? An upcoming announcement has not only shocked the league, but sent shockwaves throughout the entire basketball world. Just 6 months ago, the Fever were the pride of the WNBA. Gainbridge Fieldhouse was packed every night. Merchandise was selling out, and optimism filled the air. The franchise that had struggled for years finally seemed to have turned the corner, or so it appeared. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Tension simmered quietly, and now that internal storm seems ready to erupt for all to see. The Fever's transformation had once been hailed as miraculous. A team long forgotten by its own city suddenly found itself at the center of a basketball revival. The energy was contagious. Fans proudly donned Fever jerseys. Local businesses rallied behind the team. Restaurants rolled out Fever-themed menus, and bars promoted game day specials. Even the Indianapolis Star, which once buried Fever coverage on the back pages, began running front-page features multiple times a week. It felt like 2012 all over again, said longtime season ticket holder Patricia Anderson, referencing the year the Fever captured their only WNBA championship. Actually, it felt even better. The buzz was unreal. My grandkids wanted to go to games. People at work were talking about the Fever every day. It was everything we dreamed of. The Fever's rise didn't just energize fans, it transformed Indiana's basketball culture. Youth League saw record signups. Young girls who had never picked up a ball suddenly wanted to play. Coaches noticed players mimicking Fever Star's signature moves, studying film, and playing with a new level of passion. Economically, the impact was massive. Local analysts estimated that home games brought millions into the city. Hotels near the arena were fully booked on game nights. Parking lots charged premium rates. Downtown businesses thrived on the Fever's success. But success can be fragile, and behind closed doors, trouble was brewing. In hindsight, the warning signs were there, though easy to overlook. A player sitting alone during practice, a coach's frustrated gesture mid-timeout, and a cryptic post on social media that might have meant everything or nothing at all. In early March, veteran WNBA reporter Jessica Wallace published a piece titled Growing Pains: The Fever's Unexpected Challenges. At the time, few took notice. It sounded like another sports story exaggerating minor issues for clicks. But Wallace had seen something others missed. She observed the players' body language during practices and paid attention to who sat together during team meals and who didn't. She tracked social media activity, noting subtle patterns of who was liking whose posts and who had stopped engaging altogether. There was a disconnect, Wallace later explained on a podcast. I couldn't quite identify it, but something just felt off. The wins were there, but the joy wasn't. At least, not for everyone. Other reporters brushed her off. But as it turns out, Wallace may have been onto something much bigger than anyone realized. The Fever were winning. Attendance was booming. On the surface, everything looked perfect. But in professional sports, success often hides dysfunction. Teams with deep internal issues can still win for a while. Former NBA coach Jeff Van Gundy once said, "Chemistry issues are like carbon monoxide poisoning. You don't know you have a problem until it's too late." His words would soon prove hauntingly accurate for the Indiana Fever. Inside the organization, subtle warning signs had been there all along. Equipment managers, assistant coaches, and even front office staff had sensed tension. But they brushed it off as normal, the kind of everyday friction that comes with any competitive team. "We figured it would work itself out," one staff member later admitted anonymously. "We thought winning would fix everything." That assumption turned out to be disastrously wrong. Then came the news that shook the entire WNBA. Like a bolt of lightning, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert's sudden announcement sent shockwaves through the basketball world. In an unprecedented move, Engelbart revealed that 3 key players, all considered foundational to the Fever's resurgence, were parting ways with the organization. What followed was chaos, outrage, confusion. This wasn't just a routine roster shuffle. It was a seismic event that threatened to reshape the entire WNBA landscape. The press conference was hastily scheduled with only 4 hours' notice. Reporters scrambled to clear their calendars. Camera crews raced to the venue. Social media exploded with speculation. What could possibly be so urgent? At exactly 2 p.m. Eastern, Engelbert entered the room. Her face was grave, her posture composed. She carried a single sheet of paper and a bottle of water. No notes, no teleprompter. There were no pleasantries, no small talk. She went straight to the podium. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice," she began, her voice calm but heavy. The WNBA has always prided itself on being a league where players have both a voice and agency. Today, we're faced with a situation that reflects the opportunities and challenges that come with that empowerment. The room tensed. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. The league is aware of significant roster changes involving the Indiana Fever, Engelbart continued. 3 players have expressed their intent to part ways with the organization. While we respect every player's right to make decisions that best serve their careers, we also recognize the impact this has on the franchise, the fans, and the league as a whole. She paused, taking a slow sip of water. The silence was absolute. The WNBA will work closely with all parties involved to ensure a smooth transition, she added. We are committed to supporting the Indiana Fever as they navigate this period and equally committed to helping these departing players find situations where they can thrive. Then chaos erupted. Reporters shouted over one another, desperate for details. Who were the 3 players? Why were they leaving? Was it about money? Coaching? Something deeper? Engelbert raised her hand. The room fell silent. "I cannot comment on specific player situations at this time," she said firmly. And with that, she stepped away from the podium, leaving behind more questions than answers and a WNBA world suddenly on edge. The commissioner's statement wasn't over yet. "The Fever organization will be releasing its own statement shortly," Engelbert continued. "And the players involved will have the opportunity to share their perspectives when and if they choose to do so." Reporters pressed forward, their voices rising, questions overlapping in a chaotic blur. Engelbert had to raise her own voice just to be heard. "What I can tell you," she said firmly, "is that this situation did not stem from a single incident. From what we understand, it reflects an accumulation of concerns that built up over time. The league takes these matters very seriously, and we'll be reviewing our processes to better support both players and franchises so that situations like this can be avoided in the future." The entire press conference lasted just 12 minutes. Engelbert took 5 questions and didn't directly answer any of them. Then she turned and walked out, leaving reporters shouting follow-ups into the void. Within minutes, the story detonated across every major sports outlet. ESPN sent breaking news alerts to millions of phones. Twitter, now X, erupted in real time with theories, outrage, and disbelief. Sports talk radio shows abruptly cut their segments to cover the bombshell. The initial reaction was pure denial. Surely there had been a misunderstanding, some miscommunication blown out of proportion. 3 players leaving this team, the same Indiana Fever that had just reignited women's basketball. It didn't make sense. But as the hours passed and more details trickled in, the truth began to settle over the basketball world like a heavy fog. This was real. This was happening. The Indiana Fever, the league's comeback story, its beacon of hope, was unraveling. Even Vegas took notice. Betting markets reacted instantly. Championship odds for the Fever, once among the league's best, plummeted. Individual player award lines shifted dramatically. The financial shockwaves hit every corner of the sports gambling world. Outside Gamebridge Fieldhouse, fans began to gather. Some came looking for answers. Others just wanted to be near the arena, the place that had, only weeks ago, symbolized everything right about basketball. Television crews swarmed the scene, interviewing stunned fans who struggled to find words. "I don't understand," said one woman, her voice trembling, eyes brimming with tears. "We were so good. We were finally good. How does this happen?" Another fan stood silently by the entrance, clutching a Fever basketball. Staring at the doors, as if expecting someone to walk out and say it had all been a mistake. For once, the sports world, usually so quick with takes and opinions, was speechless. This wasn't a trade dispute. This wasn't a locker room feud blown out of proportion. This was something deeper, something systemic. And at the center of it all was the first name to emerge from the chaos, Sophie Cunningham. Though not officially a Fever player, her departure from any affiliated roster sent shockwaves through the WNBA community. Known for her relentless competitiveness and fiery leadership, Sophie wasn't the kind of player you expected to walk away. For weeks, whispers had circulated. Rumors of behind-the-scenes disagreements, clashing personalities, and creative differences. But no one thought it would come to this, not with a team so close to greatness. Standing at 6 feet 1 inch, Sophie Cunningham built her reputation not on flash, but on effort, the kind of effort that doesn't always show up on a stat sheet. The diving saves, the hard screens, the defensive rotations that prevent easy buckets. Her path to the pros had been anything but easy. Growing up in Columbia, Missouri, she wasn't a blue-chip recruit, a 3-star prospect at best. Coaches saw her as solid, not spectacular. Then she proved them all wrong. The same way she always had, with work ethic, toughness, and an unshakable belief in herself. Now, that same fire that fueled her rise might be the very thing igniting the Fever's fall. By her senior year at Missouri, Sophie Cunningham had evolved into one of the SEC's most complete and dynamic players. She averaged 18 points and 7 rebounds per game, earning a reputation as a fierce competitor who thrived in clutch moments. Whenever Missouri pulled off an upset over a top-ranked opponent, Cunningham was always at the center of it, diving for loose balls, hitting key shots, and leading with sheer intensity. When the Phoenix Mercury selected her in the second round of the 2019 WNBA draft, expectations were modest. Second-round picks rarely make headlines. Many struggle just to secure a roster spot. But Sophie, true to form, shattered those expectations. In Phoenix, she quickly became known for her grit and fearlessness. She'd guard the opposing team's best scorer without hesitation, hit big shots under pressure, and bring relentless energy every time she stepped on the floor. Fans loved her fire. Teammates admired her toughness. Coaches trusted her when the stakes were highest. So when reports began surfacing that Sophie Cunningham's name was somehow tied to the Indiana Fever's internal crisis, the basketball world was stunned. This wasn't a player who quit on teams. This wasn't someone afraid of adversity. If Sophie Cunningham was leaving, something had gone deeply wrong. According to sources close to the situation, Cunningham had grown increasingly frustrated with the team's direction, particularly over issues like playing time distribution and offensive strategy. Several teammates speaking under anonymity confirmed that Sophie had voiced her concerns multiple times. In team meetings, in private conversations with coaches, and eventually intense discussions with front office staff. "She's a warrior," said one teammate. But even warriors need to feel valued and heard. There were conversations that should have happened and didn't. Ideas that should have been considered, but were dismissed. Concerns that should have been addressed and were ignored. The turning point, insiders say, came during the team's mid-season evaluation meetings, a standard process in professional sports where players and coaches discuss performance, roles, and expectations. These sessions are typically honest but constructive, designed to strengthen trust and alignment within the team. Cunningham came fully prepared. She brought film clips, statistics, and detailed notes outlining defensive breakdowns, offensive inefficiencies, and lineup patterns that disrupted team rhythm. She wasn't complaining, she was trying to help. But her feedback reportedly wasn't well received. According to those familiar with the meeting, the coaching staff became defensive almost immediately, interpreting Sophie's observations as criticism rather than collaboration. What should have been a healthy exchange of ideas turned into a tense confrontation. Sophie didn't go in there demanding anything, one source explained. She came in with data, with solutions, with film. She wanted to win. But instead of engaging with her, the coaches basically told her, "Thanks, but we'll handle strategy." That's a terrible way to treat a veteran who's just trying to make the team better. From that point on, the relationship reportedly began to unravel. Cunningham's minutes started fluctuating without clear explanation. In games where her defensive presence was crucial, she was left on the bench. Offensive plays that once highlighted her skill set disappeared from the playbook. To the public, these adjustments seemed like normal coaching decisions. But inside the Fever organization, a different narrative was emerging. Sophie was being marginalized, said another insider. Her role was shrinking, her input ignored, her influence fading. It started subtle, but eventually it was obvious. This was payback for speaking up. And for a player who had built her entire career on leadership, resilience, and accountability, that kind of silence was something she simply couldn't accept. This was punishment, plain and simple, for daring to challenge authority. And Sophie Cunningham, being who she is, wasn't going to tolerate it. Her departure represents far more than the loss of a skilled guard. It's the loss of a leader, a fiery, vocal force who held teammates accountable and demanded excellence from everyone around her. Teams need players like Sophie Cunningham, players who care enough to speak uncomfortable truths, who are willing to risk popularity for progress. When those voices are silenced, when leaders like that walk away, the effects ripple through the entire organization. Because when the warrior leaves, everyone else takes notice. They start wondering, if it happened to her, could it happen to me? They stop speaking up. The locker room gets quieter. Caution replaces honesty. And teams that lose honesty rarely win championships. But then came the real bombshell, one that nobody could have imagined. Caitlin Clark, the player who had single-handedly revived the WNBA and transformed the Indiana Fever into a cultural phenomenon, was allegedly out. The rumor hit like an earthquake. Fans were stunned. Analysts were speechless. How could something so monumental, so unthinkable, happen this soon after her storybook arrival? To understand the scale of the fallout, you first have to understand what Caitlin Clark meant to the Indiana Fever and to women's basketball as a whole. Her arrival wasn't just a moment, it was a revolution. Attendance didn't just rise, it doubled, then tripled in some arenas. TV ratings didn't just improve, they shattered records. And across the country, millions of young girls didn't just find a basketball hero, they found a movement. Caitlin Clark's journey was already the stuff of legend before she even stepped onto a WNBA court. At Iowa, she became a generational star, scoring more points than any player in Division I women's basketball history. Her logo-range threes went viral nightly. Her no-look passes were dissected frame by frame on social media. Wherever she played, arenas sold out. What used to be routine conference games turned into national events. The pre-draft hype surrounding her was unprecedented. Analysts compared her creativity to Pete Maravich, her range to Stephen Curry, and her vision to Steve Nash. At first, the comparisons sounded exaggerated until you actually watched her play. Then you realized even those names didn't fully capture what she brought to the court. When the Indiana Fever selected Caitlin Clark with the #1 overall pick, everything changed overnight. Season ticket sales, once stagnant, exploded, selling out faster than the franchise had ever seen. Merchandise sales broke internal records within days. The Fever's media credential requests surged by over 400%. Economists estimated her arrival generated tens of millions in new economic activity for Indianapolis. And then came her rookie season, a historic masterpiece. Clark didn't just play well, she redefined what was possible. Triple-doubles became routine. Deep three-pointers from distances most players wouldn't even attempt turned into must-see TV. Her court vision bordered on telepathic, producing highlight after highlight that left commentators and opponents in awe. But more than the stats, Caitlin brought something the WNBA hadn't felt in years: electricity. She transcended the sport. Celebrities filled courtside seats. Non-sports outlets covered her every move. She appeared on talk shows, late-night television, magazine covers, and podcasts. Caitlin Clark wasn't just a basketball player anymore. She was a cultural phenomenon. And now, if the rumors she were true, that phenomenon, the one that had reignited the Fever and lifted the entire league, was on the verge of disappearing.